A rough morning for Leon. Most mornings started the same way. Marley would wake up and spend 5 or 6 minutes staring at the ceiling. Her husband was gone. Every morning that was the first thought to fill her mind. It didn't hurt anymore. Not too much anyway, not with the deep stabbing rage and grief that had filled her in the beginning. The jerk had been gone longer at this point than they'd been together. But he had been her first great love, and she'd reshaped herself to fit around his sharp corners. So even now, she noticed his absence like she would a missing tooth. Each morning, after her almost meditation, she would get up, wash her face, and brush her teeth. Then she would go to wake Fern up. As big a jerk as Ivan had been, she couldn't bring herself to regret her time with him, not when he'd left her with a daughter, one as surprising and precious as an emerald in a handful of dust. She adored Fern with every molecule in her body, with every breath in her lungs. She had built an entire new life around her, making her the gravitational center of her world. And that was enough. Mostly enough. Motherhood brought enough demands with it to keep any woman busy. Her, anyway. Seeing after Fern's needs, playing with her, reading with her, taking her on little field trips, all of that would have exhausted anybody, let alone on top of the demands of earning a living. Her days were fulfilling, loving. At the end of the day, though, sometimes she wondered if there was any of her left. Her life had become a cliche, but cliches often come into being to reflect something deeply real. Between a lack of money and her daughter's schedule, there really weren't any opportunities to go out and find time for herself. Her mother was there to help, thank goodness, but finding something for herself that depended on her mother seemed like it would defeat the purpose, maybe. She tried, though. She discovered that she wasn't very artistic. Her writing always turned into a series of bullet lists. She was a reasonably good dancer, but after a month or so of virtual dancing lessons online, she discovered that she didn't actually enjoy it that much. She suspected that she would be a pretty good cook, but found herself limited by a small child's palate. Eventually, she looked towards learning a musical instrument, but found herself restricted by a lack of confidence and money. Which, long story short, is how Marley ended up getting serious about playing the kazoo. She started by studying online, and then as she gained confidence, invented humming soundtracks to her daughter's television shows. Fern did not appreciate this. Eventually, Marley grew in confidence and started posting videos of herself playing the kazoo online. It turns out that there was a surprisingly vibrant online community of kazoo enthusiasts, and by the end of the year, she found herself with friends and a startling amount of self-respect. And then she realized she could do magic. She'd just put Fern down. It had only taken 4 library books tonight. Marley sat exhausted on the living room couch, staring absently at the one cold remaining slice of pizza in the box on the coffee table. Then, determined to get in her 20 minutes of kazoo practice before she dragged herself to bed, she pulled her kazoo out of her shirt pocket and started to play. She started with an arrangement she had come up with for Livin' La Vida Loca. There was a particularly difficult passage that she had to repeat 8 or 9 times before she was able to get out of her own way and work her way through it. When she was pretty certain she had it down, she queued up a Ricky Martin video and played her way from the beginning through the tough passage. Twice. She sat back on the couch with a small smile of satisfaction and looked over to the slice of pizza. She thought that she'd worked up enough emotional momentum at this point to lean forward and grab it. But looking at it now, she saw that there was steam rising from it. A few minutes ago, it had been stone cold. One of the reasons she hadn't been able to work up any enthusiasm for eating it was its cold stiffness. Now suddenly, it was piping hot. Except, and this was key, the pineapple. In Marley's experience, a lot of people held strong opinions about pineapple on pizza. She had a lot of time on her hands to think about this. There were hours at a time when Fern demanded that she sit with her while she played or colored, but wouldn't allow her to actually do anything, and would pitch a fit if she got up to do the dishes or something. This left Marley time to ponder the deeper questions of life, like whether pineapple had a place on pizza. After a truly ridiculous amount of consideration, she'd come to the conclusion that it wasn't the pineapple itself that was objectionable. It was hot pineapple. Pineapple could be excellent as a topping, especially when paired with roasted jalapenos, but not if it was awkwardly hot. Its juiciness went totally sideways if it was hot. Ugh, gross. But the point was, here her slice of pizza was, inexplicably hot with perfectly chilled pineapple. A woman less exhausted might have been startled by this. Such a woman might have looked for logical, non-whimsical explanations for this tiny miracle. But Marley was tired enough to accept it with aplomb and gratitude. She ate the pizza and went to bed. Over the next month or two, Marley found herself performing 3 or 4 tiny miracles a week, but only after she had played the kazoo. Practical miracles, like reviving a practically dead houseplant, or unspilling a cup of coffee, and once untangling Fern's hair after a bath when she'd been bracing herself for half an hour of melodrama. It didn't matter if she was alone or with Fern, who was too young to get hung up on how unreasonable kazoo magic fundamentally was, though the girl was profoundly annoyed when Marley started playing the kazoo at bath time. The moment when Marley's life really took a turn was 6 weeks or so after she'd discovered her strangely mundane, miraculous ability. It was the first really beautiful, sunny day of spring, and Marley and Fern had spent the morning in the park. As lunchtime approached, they started for home, crustless sandwiches and cucumber slices. About 3 blocks from home, they had to make a detour into an alley, so Fern, who had just started wearing big girl underwear, really needed to check that they were still on. Sighing, Marley took her behind a dumpster so she could reassure herself. After an appropriate length of time, Marley asked Fern if everything was okay and if everything was still where it needed to be. Fern assured her with a bright smile that it was, and they came out from behind the dumpster, only to be confronted by a young man who could best be described as sketchy. Marley and Fern nodded cautiously to their new acquaintance and wished him a good morning, whereupon he informed them that they were being mugged. Any number of things in Leon's life had come as a surprise to him. There had been unexpected heartache and accidents of fate. There had been the time he stumbled across a wallet full of money and a half-full bottle of gin in the same morning. There was the time, admittedly right after he'd gulped down that same gin, when he could have sworn he'd seen a chupacabra. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, one that also marked a turning point in his own life, when he tried to shake down a meek-looking MILF in an alley, only to have her smile dangerously at him and pull a kazoo out of her pocket. Today we're going to make something I'm calling a pink kazoo. It's still summer, it's still hot, so let's start with a lot of ice. Yeah, a little bit more. That won't hurt. Okay, as our spirit, let's go with some pineapple rum. This is from Plantaray, and it's called Stiggin's Fancy. And there's 1.5 ounces of that. It's subtly pineapple-y, but it's really good. Okay, we're also going to add 1/2 ounce of Aperol. It's another one of those, right there. It's another one of those bittersweet Italian liqueurs, but it's also beautifully red, and it's going to set off the elderflower liqueur that we're putting in. Another 1/2 ounce. Now, they sort of match each other. Okay. And, by the way, that's the most beautiful bottle, isn't it? Okay. We're going to need 3/4 ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Yeah. This lemon has had plenty of time sitting on my counter to get nice and juicy. And yeah, I was too busy thinking about the cocktail to actually measure accurately. There we go. That looks good. And yeah, that'll add a little something. Okay, now the last aspect of this is some bitters. Okay, just like a dash. Now, these are Angostura bitters, but if I were doing this again, and I did subsequently, I would use some homemade caraway bitters that I made. And as you can see, as an old white man, I really have no business getting as into the rhythm of this shaking as I am. But, you find your joy where you can. And that ice is breaking up the the different ingredients, mixing them, but also diluting them a little bit as it melts. And okay, all we're doing now is straining this drink over some fresh ice in a fancy glass. Now, ideally, I would garnish this with a plastic kazoo, but that would interfere with the purity of our analysis of it. Think carefully about this. Does it all work? Yeah, it really does. That's nice. It's sweet and sour and fruity and so good.